Hey everybody, I'm going to post this on IGTV because a lot of people are unclear as to what exactly my hunger strike is about. Um, so I'm going to break it down into what initially happened that brought me to the point where I decided to go on a hunger strike. And I'm going to go through then what has happened since I have been on a hunger strike that makes it even worse. And then I want to talk about my demands and why those specific demands. And hopefully at the end then you'll have a much better picture. But it's very complex and there are multiple levels of lies, deceit, corruption, interconnections, etc. So what first happened was I was a fantastic substitute teacher and the kids adored me. I was like a rock star. And most of my bookings, 90+%, were repeat, meaning teachers selected me specifically because they trusted me with their kids and they liked me and I did my job really well. So one day I went to the school, and as I was leaving that day, I was called into the principal's office, and I was handed a letter. And in that letter, I was found to be in violation of use of force on two separate occasions that both the principal, Susie Lee of Ely Elementary, and Shannon Sakia both know were lies. The first one was investigated by Vice Principal Deborah Ostovich, who knows the truth of that and was found to be completely untrue. In the second situation, there was an adult teacher in the room with me at all times that they refused to speak to. And the teacher of that class never heard anything, not from the children, not from the children's parents who she saw every day, and nothing from Principal Susie Lee, and nothing from Shannon Sakia, the vice principal. So then I took her to the Human Resource Department, Jeff Hoover, who refused to see me, point blank, refused to see me. Subsequently went on then to screw around with the renewal of my substitute teacher license. And that basically forced me out of the Department of Education because I was like, I'm sick and tired of these people, they're corrupt. I then was forced into a situation, because I couldn't get an attorney myself, to represent myself in court. And I sued the people individually, meaning Principal Susie Lee and Vice Principal Shannon Sakia. And my rationale was the DOE have been known to be corrupt for years, and if we're going to make a change, we have to bring the accountability to the individual levels. The DOE are going to do nothing about it. So at the same time, I approached the chairman of the board, Lance Mitsumotto, and he did absolutely nothing. And he knew that I wouldn't proceed provided they took action. And I even said, like, I'd settle for $1. I couldn't care less about your money. So he did nothing. Then I went down and actually got into litigation. Now, the law does not allow the attorney generals to represent a private party. They can represent a state employee if that employee has acted within the scope and duty of their responsibilities, which Lee and Sakia definitively did not. So either the Board of Education, who were supposed to have made that determination, either lied about that, or they lied to the Attorney General, or the Attorney General knew and still proceeded, thereby breaking the law. Either way, their involvement was illegal. No ifs, no buts, no ands. So now I'm in court, and they try to force me into arbitration, even though I had opted up front not to participate in arbitration. And the actions of the arbitration administrator, Frances Yamada, are very questionable as to whether she was in fact influenced by somebody in the government or maybe by directly by the Attorney Generals themselves. And when you're in that arbitration thing, your hands are tied. You are not allowed to conduct any discovery, meaning you're not allowed to get any evidence, you're not allowed to ask any questions. And I was under that for about 8 months, I believe it was. So in that period, I was not allowed to do anything. Now, then when they unleashed, and I was allowed because I beat them in arbitration, the judge, after 6 weeks, made a ruling against me where I had said I was going to be naming the superintendent of the Department of Education and the chairman of the board as individual co-defendants. And the judge made a ruling against me that basically gave me, instead of giving me 8 months to collect evidence, gave me 6 weeks. And at that point, the naming of the chairman of the board and the superintendent was basically not allowed or precluded. And at that point, I decided, screw this. This is corrupt to hell. And that is the point that I decided I was going to go on hunger strike. Now, the court itself, I had a circuit court judge, an arbitration judge, and an arbitrator. So the circuit court judge, who's the judge that made the ruling against me, the arbitration judge used to work for him. That was never disclosed to me. The Deputy Attorney General's father or his uncle gave testimony to the legislature to get this judge on the bench. The arbitrator, Max Devins, was on the board of the Hawaii Bar Association that also gave testimony to the legislature to get this judge on the bench. Then I find out that the arbitration judge was part of an event of which she was on the board of, where the chairman of the board of the Department of Education, Lance Mitsumoto, was the chair of that event. That was never disclosed. The arbitrator was being represented by the Attorney Generals at the time he was supposed to sit in arbitration over me and the Attorney Generals. His brother-in-law is the brother of the then sitting superintendent of the Department of Education. Now, since then, the Attorney General has given false information to the governor for the first month, saying that I was in litigation with the Department of Education, which he categorically knows is untrue. And further, the Circuit Court judge, Judge Crabtree, communicated directly with the Attorney General, which made him a part of my case, so he should have recused himself to begin with. But that was extraordinary in and of itself. Further, the second premise that the Attorney General has now given to the governor for inaction was that because I'm in private litigation that involves the state, but the only reason the state has been involved is because they have been involved illegally. His next one was to say that it wasn't the governor's responsibility, that it was the authority under the Constitution, under Article 10 of the Board of Education, which is not true. Under Article 5, Section 5 and Section 6, it is the responsibility of the governor to make sure the laws are upheld, and he is the supervisor of the government departments. And the governor himself has lied, saying he didn't know about this to my girlfriend when we know for a fact that he did. So the whole thing, start to finish, it's like a bloody John Grisham novel, and it keeps evolving, and there are just more lies. So it is complicated, and I know that it's hard for people to digest, but it is wholesale, corruption across many different government agencies, including the judiciary. And that is what we have to try and stop. This disproportionately affects poorer people. This is not acceptable. It is corruption. And the only people that can stop it are us. So we need to make some noise and say, no, you're not going to continue doing this a lot.